Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. Naruto Namikaze is a young Omega in the Umbu. He's a true genius, having managed to get into the organization at just 7 years old. Of course, it wasn't without the help of the 4th Hokage, his father, but the boy lived up to his father's expectations. His mother was initially against it. The Umbu was no place for a child, as they were the best, not shying away from the dirtiest work. But she eventually relented, seeing that her child enjoyed it, even though deep down she wished he would leave the organization. Minato responded. "But he's not at the root, he's under my command," he said, smiling his innocent smile. Naruto also attended the Shinobi Academy, where he interacted well with his peers. They didn't know about his second life, so to them, the blonde boy was a cheerful, good-natured fellow who only found himself in awkward situations. Uzumaki. That's what Naruto is called in the Umbu, though it's the maiden name of Kushina, the blonde boy's mother, and he didn't mind. His mask is a fox. It's highly symbolic, considering Naruto is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. His parents trained him to control Kurama from childhood, and now the blonde boy is gradually tapping into its chakra, gradually forming a bond with the fox. Other villages call him Konoha's little fox. His squad captain is Uchiha Itachi, and he's also his partner. Naruto was now 13 years old and a graduate of the Shinobi Academy. He had only a week left before becoming a genin, and he would also have a team, with whom he hoped to become close friends, and a captain. The blonde simultaneously wanted and didn't want Kiba Inuzuka on his team, an alpha with whom he was friends and with whom they often argued, though nothing serious. Just the usual friendly squabbles. And it didn't matter that Naruto was supposedly the weaker sex. He didn't feel it, and he was stronger than some alphas. He would have liked to be on a team with Shikamaru and Nara, with whom he had a very friendly relationship. Although he was friendly with everyone in his class. Almost. The girls and Omegas considered him a rival for Sasuke's affections, but Naruto wasn't interested in him as a partner. He was too small for relationships, and his agitation was unsettling. It's just that he couldn't explain it to others, and he didn't really try, interacting with everyone as an equal. Only one incident threw him off balance a little, an accidental kiss with Sasuke. Then the blonde felt a strong thirst for blood emanating from the girls and Omegas standing nearby. He barely managed to escape, and everything was fine. Team number 7 Naruto Namikaze, Sakura Haruno, and Uchiha Sasuke. Iruka Yumino, Naruto's homeroom teacher, announced the members of this team. "Sasuke, Sakura, good luck with your work," the blonde wished, smiling. Don't get in my way, Sasuke will be mine," Sakura said haughtily, standing up and crossing her arms. She looked at Ino Yamanaka and stuck her tongue out at her. The blonde turned away and chuckled. Come on, I don't mind." Naruto raised his hands in a placating gesture. Sasuke turned away without saying anything to his team, but the blonde appeared in front of him so suddenly that the Uchiha reflexively threw out a fist to strike. Naruto deftly dodged it, intercepting the brunette's hand, surprising everyone who witnessed it. "Don't be so mean." Namikaze smiled brightly again. "Sometimes you can't even tell that you and Itachi are brothers," he said thoughtfully, not noticing the surprised expression on Sasuke's face. "How do you know your brother?" He grinned discontentedly, pulling his hand from the Omega's grip. Sasuke noted that he had a strong grip for an Omega. The class watched silently, not daring to interfere. "Why are you so mad?" The blonde laughed nervously. "They can't know Naruto is an ANBU member. That was his parents' stipulation. And the ANBU themselves don't talk about their squad members. That's what masks are for, even though that's not their primary purpose. We live in the same village, and you're my classmate. Besides, your brother used to come get you. I've seen you two walking together before, and I've seen you smiling next to him," the Omega listed, looking at his classmate with a sly look. Sasuke wanted to hit the obnoxious Omega, but he knew he was an alpha, and raising a hand to an Omega was beneath him. But Naruto didn't act like an Omega, he acted like an alpha, which sometimes made the blonde's gender disappear. "Shut up, Omega!" the brunette said angrily, and Naruto flinched as if he'd been slapped. His blue eyes narrowed, and his thin lips first pressed into a thin line, then twisted into a smirk. Don't think that just because you're an alpha, everything is permitted, and everyone will fall at your feet. Omegas can be stronger than alphas, achieving recognition through their own strength, while alphas only brag, thinking they're males who can do anything. Naruto practically spat these words in the alpha's face, and then left the classroom, not wanting to be there anymore. Sasuke sat in shock, unable to believe it was Naruto, just like everyone else in the class. Naruto! Shikamaru rushed after the blonde, coming to his senses, but the blonde was already gone. He had never seen his friend like this. Naruto scolded himself for losing his temper, for telling that insolent alpha everything to his face, but he was also torn by a conflicting thought, to stay and tell him everything he thought about him and alphas in general. But he quickly pushed the thought away. He couldn't. He needed to leave that side of himself in the Umbu, and in everyday life, if shinobi life could be called that, be a cheerful guy and a good friend. But what had just happened hadn't been part of the Omega's plans. He'd gone to the training grounds assigned to his squad to let off some steam during training. Naruto hoped someone would be there so they could spar. In the locker room, Naruto met Itachi and, smiling slightly, approached him. Itachi-senpai, please train with me. The blonde bowed after his request. Hey Naruto-kun, but I'm sorry, I can't right now. We've been given a mission, so we're leaving tonight. So go home and get some rest. By the way, Itachi's voice became interested. You were divided into teams today, who are you with? The alpha smiled, looking at the blonde. Just say you want to know who Sasuke is with, and don't start from afar. I know you well from so many years of working together, senpai. The Omega muttered and looked at Itachi with a twinkle in his eye. Why not? I really want to know who I'll have to share my lovely partner with. The alpha returned the favor and winked at the boy, causing him to blush involuntarily and look down. Itachi chuckled softly. Ah. Namikaze exhaled heavily and looked at his senpai. It seems it's my destiny to be on a team with one of the Uchiha. Itachi's eyes were questioning, although he was beginning to guess what the blonde was about to say. I'm on a team with Sasuke and Beta Sakura Haruno. Itachi whistled. This is a hot team. The main thing is to find a worthy captain who can restrain and properly discipline these explosive teenagers. The goal of this mission was to eliminate spies from another village. According to intelligence, there were 7 enemy members, and they had managed to learn something significant about Konoha. However, one would need to be brought back to the village to extract the information Konoha needed from the enemy. Naruto is no stranger to killing enemies, though it's bizarre for an Omega. Sometimes, however, the blonde enjoys it, which frightens him, but he pushes the thought aside. But this time, something went wrong. They were being waited for, which is why the battle dragged on for a long time. The outcome was in favor of the Konoha Umbu, but the boys had to kill everyone to stay alive, so it couldn't be called a full-fledged victory. The mission failed. The Hokage will certainly understand and forgive, but this is a disadvantage for the village. Perhaps a traitor has appeared, or someone has infiltrated the village using genjutsu. It's unknown. The prisoner could have been the key to solving this mystery, but the boys failed. Naruto returned with multiple bruises and a broken rib. Itachi was luckier, as he suffered no serious injuries other than bruises and cuts all over his body. They were quickly treated in the village. Tsunade is, after all, the greatest medic in the shinobi world. Minato sighed heavily after listening to Itachi and Naruto's report. He didn't think the two would fail the mission, but it was too late. Rest. There's no turning back now. We'll come up with a new plan, you can go. The fourth turned to the window and began to think. Yes, the shinobi said simultaneously and quickly and quietly left the office, as if they had never been there. Hello everyone! Naruto greeted the kids with a smile as usual, oblivious to what was going on in the classroom. Is the new sensei here yet? He asked, looking around. No, we've been expecting him since this morning, but he's late. And you too, by the way. Sakura emphasized the last words and glared at the blonde. The teacher's late anyway, so it's no big deal. Sasuke chuckled, looking at Naruto. The Omega caught the brunette's eye and smiled at him. Hello everyone. A white cloud of mist suddenly billowed in front of the trio, and a man with white, but not gray, Hair emerged from it. His face was almost completely covered, only one eye visible. My name is Hitaki Kakashi, and I will be your teacher if you pass my test. He showed no emotion, and the boys had the feeling that Kakashi Hotake was not here. He was an alpha. A powerful alpha, as his scent indicated. And his natural scent was mingled with the scent of blood, suggesting he'd been in many battles, if not his life. What happens if we fail the test? The girl asked warily. You'll go back to the academy. He chuckled, shrugging his shoulders. What? Naruto shouted loudly. Like the academy? I don't want to go back there. I want to be Hokage. The Omega shouted nervously, making the others wince. Idiot! Sasuke breathed out. What kind of test is this? The Alpha looked at the teacher, waiting for an answer. You just need to get the bells. Only 2 of you will become genin, and the 3rd will return to the academy. Kakashi showed the 2 bells and clipped them to his pocket, then took out a book and began to read. You have until lunch. If no one manages to get the bell, then you will all return to the academy. Naruto couldn't believe he could be brought back to the academy after his long-awaited graduation. He decided he could defeat this alpha and immediately rushed into battle while the others took up positions, hiding in the shadows. The Omega failed and disappeared into the foliage, biding his time. Kakashi glanced around and continued reading his book. Naruto and Sasuke made their move. Hotake easily dodged and threw the boys away, but they turned out to be clones. The real Sasuke leaped from the sky, and Naruto from the ground. They grabbed their teacher, and Sakura struck them, hitting their target. Kakashi used the substitution technique and wasn't hit, but he noticed the 3 of them working together, which pleased him. The students retreated into the shadows again and waited. Then Hitaki decided to stop his inaction, starting with Sakura, who had fallen into his genjutsu and lost consciousness. Naruto and Sasuke ran to their classmates' screams and saw her lying unconscious. Omega ran to her and began shaking the beta, but she didn't respond. He's breathing. The blonde sighed with relief. We need to get her to a safe place, Sasuke said, looking around. Kakashi no longer attacked or showed himself. The boys calmly moved the girl and resumed their positions. The Alpha reappeared, but he looked the boys straight in the eye and immediately attacked. The boys had no choice but to defend themselves. This battle raged on for a long time, but just when they were close to ripping the bells off, they slipped away. The alarm rang, signaling the end of the test. Kakashi froze. The students froze with him, but they were ready to continue the fight, despite being exhausted and their chakra depleted. Well, you failed the test, which means all 3 of you will be returning to the academy, the man said, looking at the spot where Sakura had been lying, and when he turned around, he saw the top of a blonde head standing before him. Kakashi wanted to dodge, but he didn't even think Naruto would strike so vilely to achieve his goal. The Omega kicked Hataka hard between the legs and took those unfortunate bells. The Alpha fell to the ground, clutching his injured spot. Little bastard! He hissed. Sasuke watched in shock at the scene unfolding before him, and then heard Sakura's quiet voice. What happened? Did Naruto make it? The beta exclaimed in surprise, seeing the bells in his hands. Once Kakashi had relieved the pain, he tied Naruto to a pole and gave the others lunch boxes. I'll give you a second chance after lunch. Eat. But if you share with Naruto, you'll all fail. After these words, he disappeared with his lunch. What? Kakashi-sensei, that's not fair. How can you keep a poor Omega hungry? I completed your task. Kakashi-sensei! The Omega yelled at the entire clearing, despite the fact that Kakashi-sensei wasn't there. Shut up already! Sasuke said irritably. Eat! And brought the chopsticks with rice to the blonde's mouth. He looked at the chopsticks with disbelief at first, but then ate them. What? But Sasuke-kun. I don't care! The brunette interrupted Sakura. What kind of team are we if we don't help our comrades? He asked his partner, who had looked down. She, too, began feeding the Omega. Kakashi suddenly appeared in front of them again, and Sasuke prepared to fight again. Why didn't you listen to me? Why should we listen to a stranger? Sasuke asked cheekily, and Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You're not our teacher, so I don't see the point in obeying you. The Alpha, though much younger, looked at the ash-haired man with superiority. "Congratulations, you've passed." Kakashi smiled, freeing Naruto from the rope. "Everyone followed my instructions, and you acted like a true team, which is exactly what I wanted to see, so from now on, you're officially Genin," he explained, to the students' puzzled looks. Team 7 has been under Kakashi's command for a month now. He's a skilled and experienced captain. Naruto knows this. After all, Hatake was his first captain until the blonde was transferred to Uchiha Itachi. And during their first meeting, Naruto barely restrained himself from shouting, "Kakashi-senpai?" But he did. Even though the ash-haired man had long since been reassigned to another position. And now they have returned from their next low-ranking mission. "How many more of these cats do you have to catch?" The Omega whined in an annoyed voice and plopped down on the sofa with all his might. Kushina entered the living room, looking tenderly at her son. "So take a little break from your umbu work," she said tenderly, stroking her son's head, running her fingers through the soft strands of hair, just the way he liked. Naruto mellowed under her mother's hands, but still perked up. "They haven't sent me anywhere for a month now after that failure," he responded bitterly, once again melting under his mother's arms. "Calm down already, Databane." The woman couldn't take it anymore and hit Naruto on the head. "Mission this, mission that, Databane." "All right, Mom, don't worry, I'm quiet, Databeo," the blonde screamed, trying to dodge the now angry Kushina. She's always like this. One minute she's a sweet and smiling woman, and the next she can become a real fury if something doesn't suit her or angers her. "What's going on here?" Minato asked in surprise, watching his son run away from his mother, screaming something, and then rush towards his father, shouting, "Save me, Databeo." Minato instinctively grabbed his son by the waist and pressed him to himself, and Kushina was ready to tear both boys apart. "Darling, what happened?" the alpha asked cautiously. "It's nothing serious, your son is just unhappy with the missions, and I don't want him to put himself in danger, Databane." Her voice was now more worried than angry. Minato hugged her, pressing her close, and it turned out that Naruto was trapped between their bodies. But she almost immediately pushed her husband away, and the bloody habanera, as her classmates once called her at the academy, returned. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't sent our son to Umbu, he'd be a regular Omega and wouldn't resent missions of his rank, Databane." Minato laughed nervously at his wife's words, receiving an elbow in the ribs. "But our son is strong and has already completed S-rank missions." But this only angered Kushina even more. While the adults sorted things out, Naruto hid behind the sofa and watched quietly. But now the Omega realized his mistake and wouldn't talk to his mother about missions anymore. Enough was enough. Although Kushina was easily angered, and Minato was the most extreme, taking all his wife's displeasure on himself. What wouldn't you do for the one you love? From the outside, it might seem like the fourth is weak and a wimp, but that was deceiving. This Hokage was strong and smart. It was only around his family that he softened. If he wanted, he could shut his wife up, but that would only anger her further, and then she'd feel hurt. And Minato loved Kushina, so he wouldn't do that. Naruto, however, couldn't understand how these two different personalities got along. But these thoughts only crossed the blonde Omega's mind in situations like these. The rest of the time, the boy enjoyed watching his parents, and he wanted to have a family like them in the future. Minato had somehow calmed his fiery wife, and now they were talking calmly, as they usually did after Kushina's outbursts. Naruto couldn't understand how his father managed to cope so masterfully with his mother's aggression. The father only smiled enigmatically. "Naruto, my dear, Itachi wanted to see you at your squad's training grounds," the fourth informed his son with a smile, calling from the kitchen. Naruto, without hesitation, went to meet the captain. If Itachi had summoned the Omega, then that meant they would be sent on a mission, but Minato could also have simply told his son this to avoid the threat of Kushina. Naruto's life had been quite eventful. The Hokage had previously trained the Omega in controlling Kurama. Kushina, of course, played a major role, but she wanted Naruto to suppress the Nine Tails by sealing it deep within his mind. At first, the Omega tried to do this, but Kurama tried to break the seal, despite the fourth shinobi force being nearby and able to restore it. And Naruto suddenly wanted to befriend the beast within him. After all, they would have to be together for the rest of the Omega's life. But Naruto didn't yet know that the seal weakens during childbirth. Just as it weakened in Kushina, the Nine Tails had to be sealed within their newborn son before it could fully break free and attack the village. But to prevent his beloved from dying after the bijou was removed, Minato infused his chakra into her body. He couldn't bear it if his beloved died. But everything turned out well, although Tsunade and other doctors monitored Kushina's health until everything returned to normal, and even now they conduct a full examination of the woman once a month. Although Naruto tries to befriend the beast, it doesn't engage in friendly contact at all, instead teasing the boy at every opportunity. The beast, without even realizing it, becomes attached to the boy. Of course, the Omega doesn't like Kurama's occasional bullying, since he himself couldn't do anything to stop it. Then Minato sent his son to train in fox control, and indeed strength in general, with his former teacher, Jiraiya. This man was an alpha wanderer and hermit who wrote perverted books, although his very first book was about the ninja for whom Naruto was named. The hermit called Naruto his grandson and even taught him the summoning technique he had once taught Minato. He noticed that Naruto wasn't much like his father. While Minato was a diligent and responsible student, the Omega was flighty, restless, and unwilling to listen. He took after his mother in this regard, though he was also diligent. Naruto is a genius, but he never considered himself one. Then he joined the Anbu when Jiraiya set off on his journey again. He gave both Naruto and Minato a good scolding about it. Kushina didn't say anything, it was dangerous. But he never gave up training with this non-child. Now the Omega is strong for his age, and Fox has more or less mastered control. So training in the Anbu and on Team Kakashi was enough for him. Naruto encountered no one in the locker room. But on the training grounds, some of the squad members were training. They greeted Naruto with a nod and continued where they had left off. Itachi quickly appeared. He was supervising the newcomer. "Oh, Naruto, you're just in time. Meet." The Uchiha nodded at the newcomer. "This is Sai. Sai, this is Naruto Uzumaki. Sai has been transferred to us from Root for a while. Then he'll be back, and in the meantime, you'll be partners. Nice to meet you, Sai." Naruto smiled happily and extended his hand to his new acquaintance for a handshake. However, Sai looked at the Omega with a tense expression and extended his hand with a false smile, which the Uchiha and Namikaze immediately noticed. "Likewise, Uzumaki-kun." The brunette continued to smile falsely. His skin was pale, and his dark eyes were expressionless. There was emptiness in them, even though his lips curled into a smile. "Well then," Itachi clapped his hands to get the two of them's attention. "Now I want to test how well you two work as a team, so I can confidently send you on missions knowing you'll work well together." The boys nodded and got into a fighting stance. "Attack!" the Alpha said, and attacked the boys himself. The boys deftly dodged and began attacking, not yet using techniques. Their movements were coordinated and precise. Naruto pressed forward as usual, while Sai jumped behind the Omega and, unrolling a scroll, began drawing. Then he made hand seals and said, "Ninja art, giant painted beasts." Beasts emerged from the scroll and rushed at Itachi, who deftly dodged them, while Naruto formed a seal for his technique and then attacked his opponent. Rasengan! Of course, the Omega reduced the power of the technique, although Itachi dodged it. "Well, let's leave it at that. You've been working together very well, and I hope you'll continue this spirit on missions," Uchiha said, looking at the boys, who were tense and preparing for another fight, but relaxed after the commander's words. "Great job, Sai." The Omega jumped up to his new partner and smiled brightly. Sai only nodded distantly. "If that's all, then with your permission, I'll be taking a break." He ignored Naruto, who was chattering happily. Itachi nodded, and the boy left the training grounds. "What's wrong with him, Databeo?" the guy asked, offended. "What's his gender?" "Beta. If you have nothing better to do, then train instead of hanging around doing nothing. You and Sai will be given a mission soon, so be prepared. And be careful with this Sai. He's from the Rudambu, after all, and they're different from us," the Alpha instructed his younger comrade. "I understand." The guy nodded seriously, and then turned his burning gaze to Itachi and asked, "Does Sasuke say anything about me?" "I don't know if it's you," the Uchiha drawled thoughtfully. But he said something about a constantly loud and restless Omega who only does nothing but get underfoot, so I don't know if that was you. Itachi watched the Omega's face gradually redden, and then grinned. Don't worry about it. Naruto didn't say anything, but just raised his head and went back to the locker room. He considered his training for the day complete. But Sasuke's words hurt. And the Omega decided to ignore him when they met. He was meeting Kakashi-sensei and the team soon anyway, because they'd been assigned a mission to find an escaped ostrich. Progress, at least they'd switched from cats to ostriches, but Naruto was still dissatisfied with this kind of work. He wanted real missions, the kind he was used to. Well, maybe not exactly like this, but real ones. Naruto was a little late for the team meeting because he'd decided to stop by Ichiraku for a meal, where they were testing out the new menu. There was no way the Omega would miss that. After all, he was a big fan of ramen, something Kushina sometimes resented her son for. But the Omega assured his mother that her cooking was his favorite. This calmed Kushina down. Sasuke, as usual, was grumbling at Naruto for being late, and the Omega immediately went on the defensive, forgetting his plan to ignore the Alpha. Sakura tried to stop her friends bickering, but they ignored her. Kakashi exhaled heavily, lifted the boys by the scruff of their necks, and shook them. They fell silent and demonstratively turned away from each other, offended. Along the way, the ash-haired boy explained the details of the mission to the boys, and Sakura darted between the boys, trying to talk to one of them, but they remained silent. The girl sighed, abandoned her pathetic attempts, and fell into step with her sensei. You're acting like a married couple who'd had a fight, Kakashi teased the boys. What? All three of them said angrily. Sakura was ready to rage. After all, she wanted Sasuke for herself, and if Naruto became her opponent, she wouldn't be able to vouch for herself. How can you, Kakashi-sensei? The Omega muttered. God forbid I get together with him. I'd go crazy, Databeo. What? I'm going to go crazy with you. A fight was brewing between the guys again. Sasuke, Naruto said seriously. Promise me we'll never be together. Just friends. The Alpha shook the blonde's hand, sealing the promise. Sakura beamed happily, and Kakashi rolled his eyes. What problematic genin he'd inherited. Best friends. Naruto continued, not letting go of the brunette's hand when he wanted to pull it away. To hell with you, the Alpha said irritably, and the boys broke their handshake. They found the ostrich listed on the mission sheet. It wasn't what the boys had imagined. It took some work. It resisted too stubbornly, but they still subdued it and led it back to Konoha. The ostrich's leash was handed to Naruto, who cried out and calmed down. A week later, Naruto was sent with Sai on a mission. A piece of cake for the Umbu. All they had to do was spy on a meeting between ninja from their village and ninja from the Hidden Stone village on neutral territory. The meeting ended in failure. The stone was unwilling to accept peaceful coexistence with the Leaf village, but there were no attempted attacks. Otherwise, the Umbu would have intervened. They returned to Konoha again with nothing. But the diplomats managed to arrange another meeting. That's how Naruto lived. He was rarely home, and then, after a routine checkup, Kushina broke the big news: she was pregnant. The boys were happy. Minato was overjoyed to be a father again, and Naruto was overjoyed to have a little brother or sister. It was boring being alone, after all. The Omega had a few more responsibilities besides Umbu and Team Kakashi. He helped his mother around the house and looked after her while his father was busy. And then Karen, his little sister, was born. Naruto didn't even notice how time had flown, and he'd grown almost a year older, while he and Sax were still bickering. Karen was born in Omega, although girls are usually born Beta. There were no problems with Kushina this time, and everything went smoothly. Minato's worries were unfounded. Karen inherited her mother's bright red hair, a legacy of the Uzumaki clan. Time passed. Naruto grew up. Sai had already returned to Root, and the Omega missed him. Naruto managed to break through this Beta's defenses and befriend him. The Omega learned new techniques and completed missions. Team Kakashi also began to receive proper missions, but they fell short of what the Omega wanted. He was 15 now. He'd survived his first heat and developed his own scent. His figure had become more like that of an Omega. Alphas began to stare at him, and inhale his scent with pleasure. But to many of his friends, he was still a flighty idiot. He and his team had already passed the Chunin exam. Kakashi was proud of his students, because Sasuke and Naruto were planning to become Jonin next year. If Naruto succeeded, he would no longer have to hide the Umbu tattoo on his shoulder, and would be able to go to the public baths with his friends without fear of being discovered. Then he could say he was chosen for the Umbu squad after the Jonin exam, and that would be it. No one would know his secret. But the Omega missed the exam because of another heat. This threw the boy off balance, and he burst into tears at the thought of missing out on a chance this year. Kushina gently stroked his head, telling him he was still young and would do well next time, while nearby, little Karen, still confused, simply hugged her older brother, looking at him with her small, sad eyes, making Naruto stop crying. He didn't want anyone to be sad because of him. "Where did you bring him from, Naruto?" Sakura asked, perplexed, while Sasuke feigned indifference. Perhaps that was indeed the case. "We just met him recently, but I can't get any emotion out of him," the blonde complained, to which Sai again stretched his lips into a fake smile. "Squeeze it? What do you think this is, a tube of toothpaste?" the brunette asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "If that idiot bothers you, just ignore him and that's it," Sasuke said to Sai. "I think I'll get out of here." "Where are you going?" the Omega shouted angrily. "We have to be friends with Sai. We have to show him how beautiful feelings and emotions are," Naruto cried passionately, shedding a tear. Sakura and Sasuke sighed heavily and said out loud, "He is incorrigible. You're a hypocrite, Naruto-kun." The beta dropped his fake smile, his face impassive, and his dark eyes stared straight into Naruto's, who dropped the smile and looked at the boy seriously. "Now you're playing dumb, but in front of the captain you're a model shinobi, ready to carry out his every command. First, sort yourself out, and then try to draw emotions out of others. You'll never succeed anyway." Sasuke and Sakura stared in surprise at the suddenly changed boys, not recognizing the Naruto they were used to. They felt a killing intent. "Don't you dare call Naruto that!" Sakura shouted angrily, but then froze. She never stood up for the stupid blonde, but her tongue worked faster than her head. "Yes, he's a moron, but Naruto is a good friend and a shinobi who will always help his friends. He even helps those who aren't his friends. Get to know him better first, and then say anything." The girl was breathing heavily, and the three boys looked at her in surprise. "Sakura-chan," the Omega whispered tearfully and hugged his friend. "Thank you. Be that as it may, Sakura's right. You can't say anything about Naruto until you get to know him." The Alpha covered his eyes with his hand. "And what makes you think he's okay with the missions Kakashi-sensei gives us?" The Omega began to sweat slightly. "We can't let Sai spill the beans now." The Beta smiled. "I don't intend to answer all your questions. Bye." Sai quickly disappeared. The kids went home. No one asked anyone anything anymore. Naruto and Sai set out on their mission in silence, listening to Itachi's briefing. Naruto knew him inside and out. It was for Sai's benefit. The boys nodded and set out on their mission, masks on. Observation didn't require much effort, especially since they were still in the land of fire. The diplomats and a small detachment of shinobi decided to take a break, which Naruto and Sai were forced to do as well. "Let's get something to eat while we still have time," the Omega said, pulling out a small bottle containing tiny black pills. The boys swallowed a few pills and put the bottles away. The blonde no longer winced as he chewed the vile-tasting pills, but they contained the necessary components, just like regular food. The Beta didn't wince either, but occasionally glanced at his partner with interest. "I can't understand why my words caused such a strong reaction in your friend?" "I told the truth back then," Sai began, but his gaze never left the Leaf villagers. Naruto flinched and glanced at his partner, then immediately looked away. "Because we're friends." A short smile flitted across the Omega's lips, which was not visible behind the mask that the guys pulled back after taking the pills. "So what? I don't understand it." The brunette's voice was dispassionate, but there were notes of interest. "Tell me, Sai, have you ever had someone dear to you?" Naruto asked quietly. "With whom you feel happy, good, and at peace? With whom you could talk about everything that worries you? With whom you feel alive?" I'm sorry, but to me you seem less like a person and more like a robot. You don't express emotions, you blindly follow orders, you don't get close to anyone. Sai was no longer watching the target. He was looking at Naruto, even though the latter's gaze was directed at the group of people gathered in the clearing. Beta saw his partner's eyes, which were looking seriously, searching the area, trying to discover something. The brunette didn't know what to say to that. He simply remembered his brother. He said quietly. Naruto flinched at the soft whisper and turned his gaze to the beta. But my brother is gone, and so are my emotions. At Root, they teach you to kill your emotions, which is what I did, but after you said that, I remembered my brother and everything I felt before. The Omega listened to his partner, looking at him. Don't forget those feelings. Remember your brother, and then he will live. Naruto smiled. The Konoha group continued on their way. Sai, let's talk after the mission. Right now we need to continue the mission. The brunette nodded, and the guys continued on their way. When the Konoha detachment arrived, the people from the stone were already waiting for them. Naruto and Sai lay low, watching the negotiations. The stone was reluctant to agree to Konoha's terms, but stubbornly held its ground in favor of its village. Naruto noticed the Umbu from the other village, who also didn't interfere. It looks like an agreement is just a matter of time. The stone is also interested. Sai commented, having also spotted the other Umbu. Only this time, the negotiations were deadlocked again. The stone won't agree to Konoha's terms, and Konoha won't agree to the stone's terms. Are you Konoha Umbu? A man from the enemy Umbu appeared before the boys, but he was in no hurry to attack. Omega nodded, looking the much taller man in the eyes. The Tsuchikage told me to give this to you to deliver to the Hokage. The man handed over the scroll and disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The village envoys also dispersed, agreeing to meet again. The boys also followed the Konoha men back and forth. Upon returning, they immediately headed to the Hokage to report on everything and deliver the message. The fourth listened to them silently and dismissed them. Sai, let's be friends. Naruto extended his hand to his partner, who was a little confused when he heard the blonde's voice. Okay. A short smile flitted across Sai's lips, but it was real. I'm home, the Omega shouted as he entered the house. Son, welcome back. Kushina ran out and hugged her son. I have important news for you. The blonde looked at his mother in surprise, but didn't say anything himself, waiting for her to tell him. You're going to have a little brother or sister. Isn't that great? Kushina beamed as she spoke, which sounded more like a tongue twister. Naruto, however, was a little stunned. He was used to being alone, even though he'd asked for a little one, and now he was being blindsided by this fact. Mom. The boy's lips stretched into a wide smile. I'm glad. And he rushed to hug her. Minato found them at this moment when he returned home, and then embraced them. Are you ready to become a brother, Naruto? The Alpha smiled slyly at his son, who nodded vigorously. Naruto began spending more time at home to help his mother. Her moods began to fluctuate even more rapidly. Sometimes she would simply hug him and hold him tightly. She had done this before, but now she did it constantly. Naruto didn't object, on the contrary, he clung to her even more tightly. He learned to cook a little, and Kushina was happy about that too. You're an Omega, after all. You should be able to do Omega work, not just shinobi work, she kept saying. Naruto just chuckled, but when Kushina glared at him at such moments he'd stop, then simply smile and say, Come on, Mom, everything will be fine. Kushina developed a love for fruit, especially apples. She simply ate everything with apples. Sometimes Naruto and Minato would quietly leave the kitchen, shocked by the woman's mixed food. Son, Minato began, hesitating awkwardly. You're starting to develop an odor. I think you need to go to the hospital to find out when you'll go into heat. Naruto looked at his father in shock. Heat. He hadn't really thought about it, and he'd completely forgotten that it was about to start. He was scared. The Omega hurried to where his father had told him. The doctor, after completing all the necessary procedures, said the heat would begin in a week. He prescribed vitamins for the Omega to take before and for the week following the heat. Afterward, a scent would develop, which the Omega would carry until it was claimed by an Alpha. I think we should head to the old Uzumaki clan temple right now. There's a room there for our clan's Omegas, where they wait out their heats, Kushina said, supporting her already rather protruding belly. Naruto looked at it with affection. He, like Minato, loved to put his ear to her belly or talk to it. Kushina felt small kicks, but the boys couldn't yet feel them because the kicks were weak. Will you be with me? The Omega asked his mother in surprise. I thought I'd be alone. No, the woman declared categorically. I will help you. I don't want my son to suffer during his first heat. I was suffering. The Omega turned pale. Then I need to warn Itachi-san and Kakashi-sensei that I won't be in the village for a while. Don't worry, Dad will take care of it. So let's pack our things. Kushina was packing, and Naruto watched her carefully, remembering what he needed to take next time. He didn't understand the need for so many sheets and rags. The temple turned out to be very old and dilapidated, but Kushina continued walking until she discovered a passageway. They followed that passage to another door, behind which lay a spacious but dark room with a bed in the center. Nearby stood a large basin and tubs filled with water. The heat didn't come suddenly, as Naruto thought. Heat gradually enveloped the Omega's body, the area between her legs gradually grew moist, and her breathing became heavy. You'd better undress and lie down, the woman said quietly, helping the blonde undress. The fabric against his skin was causing discomfort, and the Omega began scratching at the area. With each passing minute, he felt worse and worse. Naruto was completely lost, whining and grinding his crotch against the bed. This brought no relief, but rather fueled his desire. Precum was already flowing copiously from his hole, soaking into the sheets. Kushina was wiping her son with cold water to relieve the fever, if only temporarily. The woman gave him water because his body needed the same amount of water the Omega was losing to avoid dehydration. The blonde drank greedily, water oozing from the corners of his lips. The Omega refused to eat, though Kushina tried to force him to. It was painful for her to watch her child suffer, and her own condition made it uncomfortable and difficult for the woman. The baby kicked from within, supporting her. And Kushina continued to care for her son. Naruto thrashed about on the bed, moaning. He wanted something inside himself. The Omega's scent blossomed, enveloping the entire room. The woman stayed with her son for 3 days. The desire and heat began to subside, and the lubrication ceased. He was now able to eat normally and was already talking to his mother. They stayed in that room for 2 more days, occasionally going outside to air out the room and to get rid of the concentrated smell of Omega heat. When all the symptoms had completely subsided, Kushina and Naruto returned home with peace of mind. Naruto was able to return to his mission without any problems, especially since Kakashi was waiting for him. As their team had a new assignment, they had to escort 2 people to the village. Omega arrived at the meeting point, where he encountered Sasuke and Sakura. As usual, the teacher was late. Hello everyone! The blonde smiled happily at his friends. Sasuke nodded silently and looked at the Omega in surprise, inhaling his scent. Hi! Sakura smiled happily. Where have you been? Well, the blonde drawled. Mom and I had some business. Namikaze laughed stupidly. He felt awkward talking about the horror that had happened to him. But alas, now the Omega would have to relive it every 3 months. Sasuke chuckled at the blonde's words, but remained silent. I see everyone's here. Kakashi appeared before the boys. There's another person going on the mission with us. I hope you'll become friends. This is Sai. He suddenly appeared before the boys. Hello? He smiled at them. The smile wasn't fake. He was starting to regain his emotions. Hey! The blonde smiled brightly, but Sasuke and Sakura didn't answer. Beta looked at them in surprise, then turned his gaze to Naruto, who remembered how their last meeting had ended. Come on, people, Sai already realized his mistake and won't do it again, Kakashi said, looking at the students in surprise. Have you met yet? Yes, but the last meeting didn't end very well, the blonde replied. Kakashi looked up at the sky. You're a team now, you need to work together, not fight. Now let's go. They're waiting for us. They had to escort 2 girls who didn't know the way to the village they were heading to. During the journey, only Naruto spoke to Sai, while the others merely watched him closely. The boys didn't notice how Naruto had drawn them into the conversation. They realized that Sai wasn't a bad guy, but he was very straightforward. He informed Naruto that this was their last mission together for now, because the beta was returning to Root. Since Naruto was gone, Itachi had to partner with Sai, and they completed a couple of missions together, and now Danzo was bringing Sai back. Of course, no one overheard this conversation. The team successfully saw the girls off. The boys were disappointed that the mission had been so trivial again. They also returned to Konoha without incident. Kakashi sent the boys home. They said goodbye to their teacher and each other, and then went their separate ways. Naruto knew he wouldn't see Sai again for a while, but he was glad they had managed to become friends. The next day, the team was indignant at the trivial nature of the assignment, but Kakashi quickly calmed their discontent by slipping them a form to participate in the Chunin exams. The boys immediately agreed, and their teacher merely sighed. "There is a month left before the exam, during which I will train you individually. If you want, you can find another teacher to show more on the exam." "I was just about to ask Tsunade-sama to teach me," Sakura said thoughtfully. "But will she agree?" "Ask her." "What's the problem?" Sasuke asked. Now he'd definitely be able to train with his brother. He wouldn't get out of it. "Yeah, I don't think she'll refuse." "Give it a try, Sakura-chan," Naruto said, smiling. Kakashi, as promised, began serious and intensive training for his students. Sakura decided to ask Tsunade, one of the great Sannin, to train her and somehow got her permission. However, the training began with healing, which wasn't easy for Sakura, but she persevered and made progress. Sasuke was finally able to start training with his brother. His brother didn't spare him, constantly teasing him, but he helped him improve his deficiencies. He even excelled at controlling his Sharingan. Kakashi even taught him the Chidori technique. Naruto lived his life at his usual pace. He trained mostly at his Umbi unit's training grounds. He helped his mother at home, as she had become quite clumsy due to her large belly, and was angrier than usual. Minato rarely left her side, and his shadow clones worked in the residence. The Hokage catered to his wife's every whim, and she was pleased. A month passed quickly. Shinobi from various villages were in Konoha, all preparing for the exam. Team 7 arrived at the venue and were directed to the auditorium for the first stage of the exam. It turned out to be a written test, lasting an hour. The students were seated in different rows. The test wasn't particularly difficult for Naruto, but there had to be some catch. Omega sensed it, but the other Chunin were watching the exam closely. Those caught were expelled, and the rest of the team was disqualified. More than 10 teams were eliminated this way. With 5 minutes remaining, the head monitor drew the attention of all the genin to himself. And now for the last question. In difficult times, what is more important, courage or wisdom? You have 5 minutes to write your answer. Everyone was thinking hard, and someone was still writing down the previous questions. Sasuke chuckled. It was a trick question. Itachi had asked him this question all the time before, and both answers were wrong if you asked them separately, but you also had to phrase them correctly. The brunette wrote, "Both courage and wisdom are important. Charging into battle with courage is certain death in most cases. But only a weakling possesses wisdom without courage, but he can find courage." Sakura thought. She sensed a catch, so she pondered it, but couldn't come to a decision, so she wrote on the sheet, "Courage and wisdom are the main traits of a ninja." Naruto paused. Wisdom or courage? Which quality is more important in difficult times? The answer is wisdom, but courage is also essential. The Omega himself favors courage. Then he realized that no matter what he chose, the latter must accompany the former. Courage. But without wisdom, courage is meaningless, was his answer. Everyone signed their forms and, when the time was up, turned them in and waited for the results. Kakashi's team talked about the test. They nodded contentedly and smiled when they learned that everyone had pretty much the same answer. "You were very verbal, Sasuke," Naruto laughed. "And you answer too smartly for such a dumbass." The alpha chuckled. The blonde wanted to hit his friend, but held back. "Oh, come on! How much longer are we going to argue?" Sakura pouted. And then the results were announced. More than 10 teams remained. Team number 7 was included in this lineup. The second stage required surviving the Forest of Death for 3 days. They also had to retrieve a scroll opposite the one they were given. Team Kakashi received an Earth Scroll. The team that brought both scrolls to the tower in the middle of the forest, assuming they made it within the allotted time, would advance to the finals. The tower contained a clock that kept track of time. When the last minute had elapsed, it would sound, signaling time had expired. The teams were given time to gather provisions for the next 3 days and devise a strategy. The teams were launched from different directions. At first, the boys were quiet, but then they began fighting. They encountered 2 teams with an Earth Scroll, which they didn't need. Sakura deftly used her acquired medical knowledge to heal the boys' injuries. During their time in the forest, they encountered many of its inhabitants, most of whom they simply fled to avoid unnecessary fights and keep their location from being revealed. Luck smiled on them on the last day, when they encountered a team with the opposing scroll. Sasuke and Naruto let out a victorious cry when they barely managed to secure the scroll. Sakura had to work hard to heal them, as the opponents were strong. Along the way, they encountered more teams whom they had to fight to protect their scrolls. When they arrived at the tower, some teams were already there. There were still 4 hours left on the clock for the second stage. Teams that didn't make it there in time would be disqualified. Ultimately, 4 teams advanced to the third round. Team 3 from Konoha and 1 from Suna. Other villages, especially Kamikaze, refused to send their genin to Konoha, opting to hold their own exam. All teams were led out of the forest by Jonin and Chunin. Those who passed were given a week to prepare. The arena was filled with people eager to watch the exam. Kushina came to cheer for her son. She sat next to her friend, Mikoto Uchiha. First fight, Gaara of Sand vs. Lee of Konoha, the announcer announced. Good luck, Lee, his teammates wished him. Lee was an Omega who used only taijutsu. Despite opening the inner gate, he still lost and was urgently hospitalized with serious injuries. Gaara was a dangerous and merciless opponent. The Kazekage, Gaara's father, clenched his fists. He hadn't wanted his son to be such a monster, but the Kazekage himself was to blame for this. Gaara was declared the winner. Temari of Sand vs. Ino Yamanaka of Konoha. The next match was announced. Ino's consciousness transfer technique was useless against Temari, and her wind power prevented her from even getting close. Temari won quickly. Niji Hyuga of Konoha vs. Choji Akamichi of Konoha. The third match was announced. Choji dropped the bag of chips from his hands and looked pleadingly at his friend, Shikamaru. But he still had to go out onto the field. This match was short, and Niji won easily. Konoha's Tenten vs. Konoha's Sakura Haruno. The fourth match was announced. Tenten used her long-range skills with her weapon, but Sakura defeated her using speed, strength, and agility. Tenten lacked precision due to wielding too many weapons. Sakura was declared the winner. Kankuro of Sand vs. Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha. The fifth match was announced. Now they wished the brunette good luck. Kankuro used puppets, which Sasuke struck with his Chidori. As a ranged fighter, he was weak in close combat, which Sasuke exploited. He was declared the winner. Shikamaru Naro of Konoha vs. Naruto Namikaze of Konoha. The sixth match was announced. Naruto knew Shikamaru was using shadow techniques, so he tried to avoid being captured and stay away from shadow casting objects. The blonde used shadow clones to defeat his classmate. But Naruto used a strategy and managed to catch Naruto, who turned out to be a shadow clone again. The real Naruto attacked from above, but the brunette dodged. He almost captured his opponent in the shadow, but his chakra ran out. I give up. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, and Naruto was declared the winner. Only the winners will participate in the next fights, and so on until there is only one person left. Temari of Sand vs. Sakura Haruno of Konoha. The seventh match was announced. The girls had different fighting styles. Sakura was skilled at close combat, while Temari was more skilled at long-range combat. Sakura threw experimental kunai and a couple of shuriken, which her opponent easily deflected with her fan. Getting any closer was also impossible. The wind was so strong that it disoriented her opponent. Sakura formed a hand seal and created 2 shadow clones. Together, they threw Konoha Temari and quickly charged. The blonde managed to destroy the clones, but the real Sakura managed to reach the girl, landing a powerful blow to her stomach. Temari then knocked her back with her fan. Sakura grinned and charged again at her opponent, who was struggling to straighten up from the intense pain. Sakura spared no effort in striking the girl. And now she wants to finish it all with one blow, but Temari is no pushover. She opens her fan fully and makes a powerful swing, sending her kunai flying through the air to finish her opponent off for sure. But when the weapon hit its target, a log with a small white cloud appeared. Temari felt a brief pain in her neck and went limp. Sakura was declared the winner. Gaara of the Sand vs Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha. The 8th match was announced. Gaara was a powerful opponent, his defenses absolute, but Sasuke managed to penetrate them with Chidori, though the breach quickly closed. It was a tough fight, and the spectators watched with bated breath. Both alphas gave it their all to prove their superiority and win. But Sasuke finally did it, and he was declared the winner. Neji Hyuga of Konoha vs Naruto Namikaze of Konoha. The 9th match was announced. Both men specialized in close combat, and Neji was a powerful opponent. Especially since he used the gentle fist technique, he could block all chakra pathways. Naruto tried to keep the alpha's blows from reaching him, but some of them did. The blonde bit his lip to keep from crying out from the pain these blows inflicted, but he, too, was paying his opponent back in full. Naruto was giving it his all in this fight, which he greatly appreciated. Naruto still managed to defeat Neji, but he needed treatment, as his condition was not the best. Sakura Haruno of Konoha vs Naruto Namikaze of Konoha. The boys were surprised that they would have to fight each other, and then remembered that there were only the 3 of them left. Naruto was given some time for the medics to heal him. After all, he had finished one fight, and now they had to move on to the next. But Shinobi must be prepared for this. "I'm sorry, Sakura-chan, but I won't lose." He looked confidently into his friend's eyes, but the guilt was visible in them. "Yeah, I won't lose either." The fight began. Naruto needed to focus on the fight, but he didn't want to hurt his friend. The blonde quickly pulled himself together and began fighting seriously, so as not to hurt Sakura. Naruto won. And he realized that it was just him and Sasuke left. The final battle, Naruto Namikaze of Konoha vs Sasuke Uchiha of Konoha. The Omega was given some time to heal and rest again. Sasuke tried to hold back, but Naruto shouted at him. "Don't you dare hold back! Fight with all your might!" Never mind that he was almost exhausted and his chakra was running low. He decided not to touch the Ninetales chakra, to keep things fair. So he wasn't the least bit upset when he lost to Sasuke, collapsing exhausted to the ground. Sasuke didn't consider it a complete victory. But the Alpha was still declared the winner due to his opponent's inability to continue the fight. Ultimately, Sasuke, Naruto, Sakura, and Shikamaru became Konoha's new Chunin. Shikamaru proved he would be an excellent captain, capable of thinking ahead and retreating when necessary. The rest will test their strengths next year. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura continued to communicate, even though they were no longer a team. Now they could be genin captains and train them. But since they were still too young, they wouldn't be given children to command. However, being squad captains on missions was entirely possible. Especially for Sasuke, who had become a jonin and constantly teased Naruto about it because he couldn't participate in the exams due to a physical disability. Sakura continued her training with Tsunade. She gained even greater control over her chakra, significantly improving her medical knowledge and participating in complex surgeries. She continued to love Sasuke. Only now these were real feelings, unlike what she had felt before. It was admiration and rivalry with her friend, Ino. But Sakura didn't admit this to him. She didn't want to be rejected and ruin their friendship over it. Their relationship with Naruto grew even better. She noticed the alphas looking at the Omega, but the blonde ignored it. When Sakura told him about it, Naruto only denied it and laughed. Sakura, as a young woman, also attracted male gazes, but hers was always fixed on Sasuke. A year later, Naruto passed the Jonin exam, but continued to hide his tattoo. He loved his little sister and spent his free time playing with her. When he went on missions, he took pills that completely eliminated his scent, making him undetectable. These pills were harmless, and both alphas and omegas took them. They lasted for 12 hours, after which the scent would begin to seep out again, spreading throughout the area. Tsunade, as the creator of these pills, had tried to improve them, but had so far failed. But the shinobi were already grateful to her for them. With these pills, the chances of mission success were increased, and their scent prevented enemies from tracking them. Other villages had other means of concealing scents, unknown to anyone outside their villages. Naruto often visited his friends and now decided to check on Sasuke, as he hadn't seen him in a while. The Uchiha quarters were bustling as usual. Reaching his friend's house, Naruto knocked on the door, and Mikoto, Sasuke and Itachi's mother, opened the door. "Hello, Mikoto-san." The Omega bowed politely. "Hello, Naruto-kun, I haven't seen you in a while, and neither have Kushina and little Karen. Are they okay?" the woman asked. "Yes, everything is fine." "And where is Sasuke?" "They're training with Itachi in the backyard." The blonde thanked him and bowed again before running to the backyard. Ever since Sasuke passed the Chunin exams, Itachi had been training with him. Even when he didn't want to, Sasuke kept up with him. And now it had become their tradition. Arriving in the backyard, the blonde saw the boys fighting and began silently watching. Naruto knew their fighting styles and emphasized certain aspects. When the brunettes finished, the Omega rushed at Sasuke, who, surprised, fell to the ground with his friend and began scolding him. Itachi only smiled. "Did Sasuke really bring the Omega home before Itachi?" asked Fugaku, who had come out to look at his sons. "What are you saying, father?" Sasuke asked, flashing his Sharingan angrily at his friend. "It's just Naruto." "Just?" The blonde jumped up and was about to rush at his friend again, but held back. "Come on, kids." Fugaku smiled, something he rarely did. "You guys had a great workout." The brunettes bowed, and Fugaku left. Itachi also left, citing business. "So what did you come here for?" the Alpha asked discontentedly. "Oh, nothing." Naruto shrugged. "I heard you were being sent on some mission, so I decided to check on you, but you were back in training." The blonde looked into his friend's eyes. "Did you hear about it from the Hokage?" the Alpha asked, sitting down on the grass. Omega joined him. "Almost." The blonde shrugged. "Be careful," he said, seeing an eagle in the sky calling out to Sasuke. "It depends." Sasuke always replied when Naruto said those words. And then they went their separate ways. Once the boys became Jonin, they no longer went on missions together. Naruto wanted them to go on missions as Team 7, but alas. But they did meet for barbecue or at Ichiraku Ramen, Naruto's favorite place. Now he wanted to check on Sakura, who was supposed to be at the hospital for a practical training session, but he was surprised to see an eagle in the sky summoning him to the Hokage. The blonde changed direction and quickly found himself in his father's office. Besides Minato, there was another young alpha there. He had long dark hair, pale skin, and cunning yellow eyes with purple-winged slits. He was dressed in Konoha gear, a green vest with a red swirl on the back, black pants with a headband, a pouch on his waist, and a bandana over his forehead. It was the first time the Omega had seen him. This alpha looked at Naruto searchingly, just as the Omega did. "Orochimaru, Naruto, I order you to track down this man, and then you know what to do, Orochimaru," the fourth ordered. Naruto didn't ask any questions. An order was an order, but he was dissatisfied that the details of the mission hadn't been explained to him. "Yes," they said in unison. "Let's go. I'll fill you in on the details along the way," said the blonde's new partner. The blonde nodded and followed the man. They quickly left the village, moving at high speed, but even so, Orochimaru managed to tell the blonde about the mission in a calm voice, without a hitch in his breath. They needed to track down and capture the man who had stolen Orochimaru's research from the lab and even managed to sneak into the Hokage's archives and steal important documents before he left the country. Otherwise, they would have trouble catching him. But since the theft was discovered almost immediately, that meant the traitor couldn't have gotten far, and the Alpha was tailing him. Indeed, they quickly found the man. He sensed he was being followed, so he set traps nearby, but it wasn't enough. Naruto immediately launched a frontal attack, drawing the enemy toward himself. But Orochimaru got there first, summoning his summoned animal, a snake, which grabbed the traitor in its grip. "Where's the stolen data?" the Alpha asked his former subordinate in a raspy voice. He stared into the brunette's yellow eyes and couldn't utter a word. For a moment, Naruto felt sorry for the guy. He was very young, about 21, at a glance. A handsome man with brown hair and gray eyes and short. An Omega. But that wouldn't soften his sentence. Betrayal is no joke. But he did something the boys didn't expect. Instead of answering, he spat in the Alpha's face. "This doesn't belong to Konoha," the boy said brazenly. He snapped out of his stupor at Orochimaru's gaze. The brunette narrowed his darkened eyes and slapped the Omega, grabbing him roughly by the neck, causing him to wheeze. "Let go, or we'll get nowhere," Naruto interjected. "Then whose is it?" he asked the other Omega rudely. Now he was beginning to understand why his father had sent him on this mission. They were both Omegas, and perhaps Naruto would be able to stir him up and find out the reasons for his betrayal, or perhaps he wouldn't be able to restrain himself and kill him. After all, it hadn't been said that he was needed alive. "Konoha stole this from my home village, and I will return the stolen data," the captive screamed and began to thrash about, trying to free himself, but the snake only tightened its grip. "And whose do you think they are?" the blonde asked rudely. Orochimaru stood there, smirking. "Yes, why do you consider my developments and experiments the property of another village?" The Alpha joined the conversation. The Omega shrank back, his expression making it clear he didn't want to talk. "If you don't want to tell me what village you're from, then just return what you stole. It's clear it's the Iwa's doing anyway." Naruto wasn't sure of his words, but he hoped he'd hit the nail on the head with the village he'd named, since Konoha only had such a strained relationship with the IWA. And the blonde was right. The brown-haired man shuddered, hatred burning in his eyes, and looked at the other Omega. "How did you?" He realized he'd stopped short, confirming the teenager's guess. Alpha whistled. "I'm not saying anything else. That's all it takes," Orochimaru said, smiling contentedly as he approached the boy and slit his throat. Blood gushed out in a pulsating fountain, but Orochimaru and Naruto moved just in time, and the gushing liquid didn't hit them. The snake holding the captive vanished, leaving behind a cloud of white smoke, and the body collapsed. The boy stopped wheezing and fell silent forever. Orochimaru placed a scroll in front of him and began drawing some symbols. "What have you done, Orochimaru-san?" the Omega lamented. "We still haven't found out where he put the stolen Konoha documents." "Calm down, Omega. While we were talking, one of my snakes found everything and brought it to me." The Alpha showed the scrolls to the alarmed Omega. After that, the brunette made the seals, and the body of the recently killed Omega was transferred to the scroll. "Okay, but why do you need his body?" "But little Omegas aren't supposed to know that. Let's go back." Naruto didn't have time to react indignantly to the man's words and silently followed him. He sensed something was wrong, but couldn't put his finger on it. He couldn't sense the enemy's presence, and there was no tail. But the Omega couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Hey, Omega!" Orochimaru called out. Naruto stopped on the same branch with him and looked at the man questioningly. "You should take a pill, your sweet scent is getting through." "I don't mind, of course, but those are the rules." Now Naruto understood the problem. The smell was too cloying and quickly began to spread around the area after the pill took effect, although that shouldn't have happened. It was all because of the approaching heat. The blonde quickly swallowed the pill and followed the Alpha. Minato was worried, so he paced the perimeter of his office. The fourth was concerned about secret information falling into the wrong hands, but he'd sent 2 strong shinobi, and they should be able to handle it. But he was more worried about sending his son, a young Omega, on a mission with an Alpha. A young Alpha. And while Orochimaru knows how to restrain himself, he's a sucker for dalliances with Omegas, despite the fact that the lab is called his wife because the Alpha rarely leaves its confines. Only missions and dalliances, but even there, he has Omegas. And Minato's fatherly heart ached with worry about his son, especially since he was on the eve of his heat. But he'd taken a pill during his last mission, so it was still effective. The main thing was that the Omega didn't forget to take it after the expiration date, as Naruto's scent was attractive to Alphas. But then again, Orochimaru isn't stupid enough to lash out at Naruto during a mission. He's not some animal and knows how to control his temper. Minato tried to calm himself down like that. It helped, but only briefly. And when both shinobi appeared in his office, the Hokage began to examine his son with a critical eye. Orochimaru burst out laughing. "Fourth, don't worry, I didn't touch your son. I'm not interested in children, and the mission is complete. I've taken the traitor's body for myself. I'll report back later. Allow me to take my leave," the brunette said with a chuckle and left the office. Naruto looked questioningly at his father, who collapsed into a chair, breathing a sigh of relief. "What is it?" the Omega asked with interest, but Minato shook his head and asked, "How's the assignment?" "As you can see, we've managed." The Omega shrugged. "Are you coming to dinner tonight? Mom's worried you're so immersed in work again and not noticing anything," the Omega said reproachfully. "Come. I'll have to go away for a few days." At first, Minato looked sternly at his son, but then he understood the reason and promised to come, smiling. It was business as usual at home. Kushina was cooking something in the kitchen, keeping an eye on her and playing with her daughter. Karen was already running around the house. She was 2 years old, after all. She was a stubborn and headstrong girl. Naruto abruptly picked up his little sister and spun her around. The girl cried at first, then saw her brother and smiled, reaching out to him, babbling something Naruto couldn't understand, but he still listened with a smile. "Sakura-chan came to see you today. Where have you been, son?" Kushina asked solicitously. "Father sent you on an unexpectedly urgent mission," the Omega replied, continuing to play with his little sister. "And, as you can see, it was completed successfully. Are you even keeping track of the calendar, Databane?" Kushina began to scold. "You'll go into heat tomorrow or the day after, and you haven't even started getting ready. Do you want the whole village to be here?" "Mom, calm down. I'll gather everything we need today and leave tomorrow morning." The Omega waved his arms in front of him. "Everything will be fine." The boy hugged his mother and kissed her on the cheek. Minato came to dinner as promised. Kushina scolded him and even tried to beat him for not remembering them and not coming home, while little Karen sat in her father's arms, smiling at him. The Hokage immediately began playing with his daughter. "Darling," the Alpha said thoughtfully as they lay down to sleep. Kushina looked questioningly at her husband, settling herself next to him. "We need an Alpha son. And I'll cut short your indignation, which is evident on your face. I love our children, but we need an heir who will continue the Namikaze name. After all, when our children marry, they will join their husband's clan and take his name. The Namikaze clan will end. And I love our children." He winked slyly at his wife, who had flushed at Minato's words. "But not now. Karen is still too young for me to handle another child. But let's limit it to 3. I can't handle it anymore. After all, you're always at work." Minato felt a pang of guilt. "But I don't blame you. After all, you're the Hokage and this is your job. You made our dream come true for both of us and gave us 2 beautiful children. And I don't mind a third, as you understand. I love you, my silly Minato." Kushina smiled tenderly, looking into his eyes. "I love you too, my bloody habanero." Minato kissed his wife tenderly and sensually. Having finished his heat, Naruto returned to the village. After unpacking his things, he decided to go for a walk, or more precisely, to his favorite, Ichiraka. The boy was already known there, and the owner, who also worked there, sympathetically inquired why Naruto hadn't visited in a while. The boy explained that he was working, to which the old man smiled and served the Omega a double portion of ramen. The blonde's eyes lit up with delight. "I adore you, old man!" and began to eat his favorite dish. Although Kushina sometimes got angry when Naruto overindulged in ramen, the boy deftly avoided the topic. When Naruto left Ichiraku, happy and well-fed, he noticed Itachi and Sasuke conversing. Their backs were to the blonde, so they couldn't see him. They could smell the Omega though, as in the village, when not on missions, the boy doesn't hide his scent. Many available alphas would stare at him, and might even make dirty jokes or whistle at him, as they were seeing a handsome Omega with an alluring scent. But Naruto didn't pay any attention to this at all. He didn't even think about relationships, and when someone suggested that, as an Omega, he should find a strong alpha protector. Naruto would get furious and say he only had one alpha protector, his father, Namikaze Minato. The blonde isn't weak and can stand up for himself, but many didn't take him seriously because of his gender. The lewd jokes directed at him ceased when they realized he was the Hokage's son. Then, many of their arrogance subsided. But Naruto didn't take advantage of his father's position and preferred to deal with the insolent brats himself. And now, when he wants to catch up with his friends, someone suddenly grabs the guy by the arm. "Omega, want to have some fun?" It was some nice-looking guy wearing a Konoha forehead protector, but Naruto had never seen him before. He didn't panic and pulled his hand out of the man's grip. "Depends on your definition of fun," the boy said in a heavy voice, without a hint of playfulness. The boy laughed and grabbed the Omega's chin, lifting his head. "Doll, do you want to play?" He leaned toward Naruto, breathing the words against his lips. Namikaze frowned and swung his fist at the impudent fellow's nose, but he recoiled and caught the Omega's fist. However, if Naruto had been more serious and had been punching with the intent of actually causing damage, he wouldn't have let the boy dodge or would have hit him sharply again. But this only got Naruto worked up, and he began circling Naruto. The other boy didn't care that they were on a crowded street, and people were already gathering around them. He liked the Omega and wanted to test him. And he wasn't disappointed when the blonde fought back. Neither of them were fighting seriously. It was simply a test of their opponent's strength. They ended as quickly as they began. "Well, Omega, you're not bad." The guy winked and disappeared, as if he'd never been there. Naruto chuckled. This was the first time someone had decided to go beyond words and start openly pestering him with obscenities, which eventually led to something resembling a fight. "You're such an idiot, Naruto!" he heard his friend's disgruntled voice. Turning around, the blonde saw two Uchiha brothers who had decided to watch the performance put on by the blonde and the unknown guy. "What did I do?" Namikaze asked the brunette with displeasure. People began to disperse, and some decided to see how the altercation between the two would play out. Sasuke chuckled and looked his friend over for injuries, though he knew it was nothing serious. "Is this the first time someone's tried to pick you up like this?" Itachi asked, grinning, watching the blonde with a twinkle in his eye. Naruto frowned and scratched the back of his head, ruffling his hair. "Brother, we need to go, or father will be displeased again," Sasuke reminded Itachi, who was exchanging glances with the blonde. The younger Uchiha found this suspicious, but he didn't dwell on it, simply saying goodbye to his friend, and he and his brother hurried to their father. Since the Uchiha brothers had to leave urgently, Naruto decided to go home. Especially since Itachi had made it clear the blonde absolutely had to be there that evening. As silently commanded, Naruto reported to Anbu. He went to see Itachi, but he wasn't alone, but with some guy. Clearly an Omega, and an Uchiha, no less. "Is this Naruto Namikaze?" The blonde heard the Omega's pleasant voice. "Naruto, come here. We need to talk," Itachi called without turning around. "Meet you guys. I'll begin. My name is Shursui Uchiha. Nice to meet you. Naruto Namikaze. Nice to meet you too. Now I'll tell you the information. Naruto, promise to keep quiet. Only Shursui, the Hokage, and I know about this mission. Now you'll be privy to it, and I hope you'll agree to it." "Well, Captain, you're asking, not ordering." The blonde chuckled, but seeing Itachi's serious look, he meekly fell silent and began to listen to the brunette with all seriousness. "We've received a mission to infiltrate the IWA village for espionage. We could, of course, send one of our own spies, but we need to get close to the Tsuchikage in record time and learn his plans for Konoha. There's growing concern that they're planning a war against us. And to carry out this mission, we need 2 trusted Omegas. As you understand, that's you and Shursui, but we need your consent. Shursui and I will provide you with grounds to hang around Old Man Anoke without suspicion. We'll place most of the village under genjutsu, where you're known. I know it will be difficult. And while we're busy casting genjutsu on the enemy, you must study the dossiers of everyone who's fallen under our influence. Do you agree?" Itachi finished his story. Naruto listened, unable to believe what he was hearing. It was unthinkable to place an entire village under genjutsu. Especially to just 2 people, even if they are geniuses of their clan. but Naruto can't refuse, because everything is done for the good of his village. I agree, the blonde replied firmly. How far along are you in your plans? The plan itself is still being developed. Shursui, who had been silent until then, spoke up. First, we need to fully coordinate everything with the Hokage and listen to his ideas. On top of that, we needed to decide on my future partner so we could ingrain him into the residents' memories. It's not that easy, but we'll manage, the Omega from the Uchiha clan concluded with a wink. And even more so, when you arrive in enemy territory, you'll have to stay there for quite some time, maybe a year or two or more. And the stone will consider you their spies, Itachi added. Naruto didn't want to leave his home, his friends, his village for long, but for their protection he would have to endure this separation. Got it, the blonde nodded in agreement. That was the end of the conversation, and Naruto, without saying anything else, left. He went to his father just to talk, although he still had to bring up the mission. Kakashi appeared in the Hokage's office, looking rather uneasy. He seemed uneasy about something, but tried to feign indifference. After greeting them, Naruto waited outside for the adults to finish their conversation. It didn't take long, and Kakashi left the office, nodding to his student. He would have stopped to speak with the Omega, but the Hatake had urgent matters of his own. Hello, father. Hello, son. Minato looked at Naruto. I assume Itachi told you? He received a nod in response. Sorry, Naruto, if I could suggest someone else, I wouldn't have nominated you. But as you know, there were some minor problems with the Uchiha clan in the past, but we smoothed them over, and now, to strengthen their trust in the village, we're nominating 2 of our most trusted Omegas. Why Omegas? This question haunted Naruto, and he decided to ask his father. In the stone, Omegas aren't considered dangerous. They're beneath women there, and there's no respect for them. Only a few are considered ninja, and even then, only spies, which is where you'll be. You'll have to double as spies, but don't worry, son, it's for the good of the village. I understand, Dad. It's an honor for me to serve on this mission. And I'm honored to have such a son, Minato replied, smiling. So let's drop the subject for now, and not a word to Mom. Deal? The Alpha winked playfully and, coming over, hugged his son. The Omega nodded and chuckled. But then they'll both get it from Kushina for keeping quiet about such an important matter. But it's better to let him get over it later than to nag at them both now about this being an unsuitable mission for Naruto and so on. The Omega laughed and thought. Everything was too transparent and there was no concrete plan. But that's okay, they weren't being sent on a mission right away. They'd work out the details later. Right now, the main thing was to prepare for what was to come. Naru, tell your mother that I want something tasty for dinner. Okay. Naruto shouted as he was already leaving the office. The plan to infiltrate the stone had been in the works for a month. Only a few people knew, the Hokage, the head of the Uchiha clan, Itachi and Shursui Uchiha, and Naruto. Others were simply forbidden from being informed of the upcoming events. Naruto continued to actively communicate with his friends, especially since he now had a lot of free time. The 3 of them were even sent on a mission together once, where they reminisced about their past, including Naruto and Sasuke's arguments. Only now, Sakura wasn't panicking, frantically trying to break up the fight. She laughed, and then, when Sakura had enough, she simply hit each of them on the head, and they quickly calmed down before Sakura could get any angrier. They all knew what a girl could be like when she was angry. Naruto is almost 17, and many available alphas are showing mixed feelings about him, but the Omega is used to it and pretends not to notice. Naruto has decided that his alpha will be stronger than him. Although if love is strong, strength won't matter, but the young Omega has yet to experience that feeling. However, Sakura has told him a lot about their girly side, as she's long been pining for Sasuke. True, many girls and Omegas are crazy about him, but he remains unapproachable. But you're the closest to him, Naruto once told her, smiling encouragingly when Haruna was once again shedding tears over the brunette. Just try hard, Sakura-chan, and you'll succeed. Naruto always supports his friends. He has many, but Sasuke and Sakura are the closest. At the academy, he had more time to spend with friends, but then there were the teams, the Chunin exams, and so on. Some are already jonin and have no time for friends. Naruto would immerse himself in preparation for the upcoming mission, but he's a little afraid. Namikaze doesn't admit this to anyone, trying to overcome the fear that's clogging his throat. He eventually manages to do so, but the panic attacks still creep up on him. It's a terrifying feeling. This is Naruto's first time undertaking anything like this, as is a mission of this nature. The blonde would rather accept the mission of destroying the entire IWA village than infiltrating it for an indefinite period of time. Especially since the boy doesn't know this Shisui at all, but they'll have to be together and try not to ruin the cover story they've created for them. Okay then. Minato begins reading. We'll keep Shisui's real name. Besides, you're instantly recognizable as an Uchiha. Naruto will become Izumi Naruto. And why do I have a girl's name? The boy asked with displeasure. Well, that's what you called yourself when you used sexy no jutsu, Minato replied with a chuckle. The Omega flushed red with embarrassment and began muttering something under his breath, while Itachi and Shisui burst out laughing. Well, let's continue. Since Shisui is an Omega of the Uchiha clan, he is forbidden from marrying anyone who isn't an Uchiha without the clan head's consent. Such marriages are rarely approved, and Shisui was no exception, so he defied the clan's orders and married his beloved, Izumi Kotaro. This greatly angered the Uchiha head, and he sent his men to kill Kotaro and bring Shisui back. It turns out, however, that Izumi Kotaro has a younger brother, an Omega named Naruto, who has sworn revenge on his brother's killers and the village for failing to punish the culprits. However, Naruto is a genin and not strong enough to face the enemy alone. He helps Shisui escape, and the two head to the IWA village, which has a rather strained relationship with Konoha. The Omegas offer that Tsuchikage a deal when they're brought before him. They provide him with all the information they have about Konoha and the Uchiha clan, and the stone destroys the enemy. Is that correct? The Hokage finished reading the legend the Omegas would carry into the stone. Everyone nodded. I find this idea dubious. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose thoughtfully. As we know, Omegas are despised in the stone, so they're bound to fall for the idea that we're capable of betraying our families out of love. Shisui said. Especially since we've already begun placing the residents under genjutsu. For them, we've only been there for a little over a month, so we need to try to act natural. Naruto, have you already started studying the files on those we gave you? The blonde nodded in response. Don't worry, a few days before the operation, I'll immerse you in my Tsukuyami to train. Itachi winked at Naruto, who broke out in a cold sweat. He'd already been there once, and he was reluctant to go back. But what wouldn't he do for his beloved village? Sighing heavily, the blonde nodded. You can start already so as not to waste time. The Omega replied. Unfortunately, we still need Itachi's strength, so let's hold off on that. Shisui interjected. We haven't completed the first half of the plan yet. Shisui is right. The Hokage said thoughtfully. It would be better not to put Naruto into Tsukuyami at all, so as not to strain your eyes, Itachi. I think Naruto will be able to adapt anyway. Right. Minato asked emphatically. He was the Hokage now, not his father. I'll try. Besides, I don't think it's possible to recover from the death of a beloved brother in a month, especially when there are no relatives around, so my absent-mindedness might be mistaken for grief or even ignored altogether. Omegas and all that, Naruto said. Shisui nodded in agreement. Well, you're starting to get into character. He smiled contentedly. If that's the case, then we just need to decide what can be conveyed to the stone. We'll have to sacrifice some information to avoid suspicion. And you'll have to act accordingly. And you, Naruto, will have to be a hot-tempered teenager. He'll handle it. Itachi snorted. The younger blonde shrugged and looked at the captain with displeasure. He didn't look quite right. Cheerful? Nervous? Naruto couldn't figure out what was wrong, but he continued to watch. With that, they ended the meeting and dispersed, but tomorrow it would all happen again, but attention would shift to something else. And so it continued until the Uchihas finished placing everyone under their genjutsu. Naruto warned his friends that he was leaving on a long-term mission and that he didn't know when he'd return. Kushina, however, demanded all the details of the mission from Minato and Naruto. Under pressure from the woman, Minato only said it was an infiltration. The woman raged for a long time, but there was nothing she could do. She asked Naruto to be careful and return home quickly. Now they are alone with Shui in a hostile environment, in an unknown village with its own rules and regulations. Naruto felt uneasy in a strange village among strangers. He had to play the weak and withdrawn Omega, which he did well. The Omega tried to get closer to Shui, but he was constantly under surveillance. The Tsuchikage didn't trust him. As a sign of loyalty, the boys were forced to share all the information they had about Konoha. The Omegas were prepared for this and coordinated all the details with the Hokage, who had to allow the disclosure of some minor secrets. Naruto was constantly getting snubbed by the Alphas and many of the girls. Girls were valued more than Omegas here. Omegas weren't considered human, and they didn't advance very far in the ranks. Usually, only Omegas without Alphas were targeted. Because if you insulted an Omega, you'd be insulting their Alpha. But if that Alpha hadn't done much for the village, they and their Omega could become laughingstocks. All this was strange to Naruto, but he tried to distance himself from it all, and he excelled at being reclusive. Due to his age, he wasn't sent on serious missions, but was assigned to a team with 2 other Omegas, who were given simple tasks like finding a lost cat, herding cattle, harvesting crops, and other such trivial matters. But Naruto also benefited from his stay here. Omegas are required to attend healing courses. And although the blonde had no particular healing skills, he still sought to gain this experience. Especially since the techniques of another village were strikingly different from theirs. But as a foreigner, Naruto hadn't been taught everything, so if he proved his loyalty, anything might still happen. Several months have passed since the Omegas arrived in the stone. They're now more or less considered part of the family. Shui has become more trusted and sent on missions more often. And most of the time, they encounter Konoha people, whom the Omega slaughters viciously. But these aren't Konoha people, but they're shadow clones, which linger for a time like the bodies of the fallen. During the battle, Shui discreetly passes on the bits of information he's managed to glean. And these Alphas from the stone merely laugh as the Omega brutally destroys those he once shared a village with. So far, no one has suspected anything. Omegas rarely meet, despite living in the same house and still being monitored. And over dinner, they usually have similar conversations. "How are your healing skills?" Shui asks with an indifferent expression. "There are some slight improvements, but everything is the same. I don't have the talents my brother had." The blonde laughed awkwardly, and Shui only sighed heavily. No one saw the gestures they actually used to communicate, and if they did, they didn't pay any attention to them. "The Alphas aren't bothering you?" This was the question that worried the older Omega the most. "Almost none, and I'm already used to it." Naruto smiled. "Brother, today the teacher said that our team will be taking the Chunin exams." "What?" Concern flashed in Shui's eyes, then he corrected it again to indifference. "Well then, try your best, since you were lucky enough to be chosen. We must do everything we can for the stone. After all, the Tsuchikage allowed us to live and work here, and didn't kill us, because we're from Konoha." Shui looked seriously into Naruto's eyes, conveying completely different words through his Sharingan. "Of course, brother, I'll do my best," Naruto shouted passionately. "I believe in you, Naru." A smile touched the brunette's lips. He almost always shortens Naruto's name because he sees him wince when called Naruko. "I have a week to get ready. Will you help me?" The younger Omega looked hopefully into the older one's eyes. "Of course, if they don't send me somewhere again." And just as Shui finished speaking, the door suddenly swung open, revealing Shui's partners. "Shui, the Tsuchikage is urgently calling us." Uchiha ruffled Naruto's hair and, frowning, followed the Alphas. All week, while Naruto was preparing for the exam, there was no news from Shui, because of which the blonde was worried and could not always concentrate on training. "Pull yourself together, Naruto," said one of his teammates, Hiro. He was a hot-tempered Omega, but Naruto didn't even notice, continuing to stare blankly into space. He only calmed down when Nami, the third member of their team, patted the blonde on the shoulder. Uzumaki apologized, and the Omegas continued their training. They had an exam tomorrow, and the Omegas were nervous. There would only be 2 teams with Omegas. And this exam wouldn't involve team elimination, just one-on-one battles. And it didn't matter who your opponent was, Alpha or Omega. The Omegas would be lucky if they were matched against each other, but fate and chance dictated everything. Naruto was confident that if anything came up, he'd use a little more chakra to win. And all he had to do was calmly wait for Shursui. The Alphas were overwhelmingly present at the exam. The battles were fierce. No one was spared, and the defeated were carried barely alive to the hospital. It was a shame for the Omegas, but it couldn't be helped. And then it was Naruto's turn. He was pitted against an overconfident Alpha, who humiliated the Omega in every way and made lewd jokes about him. There was much that the blonde ignored and launched the attack first after the bell rang. But the Alpha proved no pushover. He deftly parried the Omega's attacks. Naruto, however, wasn't falling for the enemy's tricks. At one point, he did take an attack from behind, but quickly recovered and intensified his attacks, surprising the Alpha. While the Alpha was still in shock, Naruto managed to land another blow, which overwhelmed the Alpha with rage. He began unleashing random attacks, hoping to catch the Omega, but the Omega only continued to egg the Alpha on, who had lost control. Whether it was Omega solidarity, or the approaching heat, or something else that had stirred within Naruto, he decided to avenge the Omegas who had lost. And in the end, the Alpha was quickly transported to the hospital. The blonde had won. Many stared at him in shock, for the boy hadn't shown any promise, yet he managed to knock the Alpha down, but he still looked indifferent. The Tsuchikage assessed him. Another Alpha looked at him with interest and said, "How interesting." When the battles were over, the victors lined up before the Tsuchikage. Of the 6 Omegas, 2 emerged victorious, Naruto and Nami. The Tsuchikage ordered the 4 Alphas who had been fighting the Omegas to fight each other. This eliminated 2 more people. The rest became the village's young Chunin. "This is the first time I've seen an Omega win his first exam," the Alpha, whom Naruto had never seen before, said with a smirk. Though he remained calm on the outside, anxiety was beginning to rise inside. What kind of stereotype is that if he's an Omega, he won't pass the exam on the first try? Especially since Nami passed too. Naruto chuckled discontentedly. "Don't be so blunt, Omega. That guy already tried to pass the exam. So you're the first Omega I can remember who's done it." "My name is Deidara," the strange Alpha chuckled. "And I'm seeing you here for the first time." "Who are you?" Deidara's smiling face suddenly turned serious, making Naruto swallow hard. This Alpha was putting pressure on him. "My name is Naruko Izumi. I've been living here with my brother for several months now," the Omega reported discontentedly. He couldn't understand why his body was affecting this Alpha so much. His knees were buckling, sweat was breaking out at his temples, and saliva was pooling in his mouth. And Naruto hadn't even smelled him yet. Perhaps he hadn't yet recovered from the mission. "Oh, so you're the one from Konoha?" Dei nodded understandingly. "Well then, see you later." And he disappeared as if he'd never been there. Now Naruto is a Chunin in the stone, which means that here too he will be sent on serious missions outside the village. Finally Shursui returned, but he was somehow agitated, pale, and there were many bruises and scratches on his body. "What happened?" the blonde asked worriedly and started running around the Uchiha. "Everything's gone to hell," Shursui shouted angrily. Using his Sharingan, he showed Naruto everything while he was healing his wounds with jutsu. Their team had been attacked by mercenaries who stole some documents from the Alphas, which they urgently needed to deliver to the Lord of Earth. Everyone on the team was seriously wounded, but they still recovered the documents and killed the unknown assailants. And now they need to report to the Tsuchikage. "I never thought I'd fight almost to the death for the stone. He'll probably blame Konoha," Naruto thought as he left. "We were attacked, which is why we were delayed. Now it's time to go to the Tsuchikage. Sorry I couldn't attend the exam." "How did you do?" "I got through. I just lost my temper a bit, and that Alpha is recovering in the hospital." Naruto laughed awkwardly and ran his fingers through his long hair. Shursui just looked sternly at the younger man, and the blonde read disapproval in his gaze, to which he shrugged. Soon, Shursui's teammates came for him, and Naruto was left alone again. Even though he had become a Chunin, he still had duties within the village. But before he could get past the threshold, he was informed of a mission under the command of one of the most powerful Jonin of the IWA. The Omega quickly wrote a note to the Uchiha and headed to the meeting point. The team selected was small. It consisted of 5 people, 4 of whom had just passed the exam yesterday. Guys, today I'm just testing your strength, but that doesn't mean you'll get off easy. 2 Omegas, not bad. Deidara's manner of speech was odd, but everyone listened attentively, not daring to interrupt. The Alpha continued to sling mud at everyone, watching the boys' reactions. But the Alphas only clenched their fists in anger and glared angrily, saying nothing. The Omegas, meanwhile, cast their gaze downwards and cringed with every word. Naruto tried to look like a weak Omega, but his anger was starting to take over. Naruto told himself he couldn't lose his temper, or he could ruin the entire operation. Wimps! Deidara snapped at the end of his speech. We need warriors who can stand up to anyone. And you just listen to all the crap about yourselves without a word. And don't try to struggle now, the moment has passed. The Jonin snapped, just as one Alpha was about to speak up. Everyone failed the first part. Now we'll test you in practice with me, otherwise you've been messing around with each other, and are standing here in front of me, satisfied. But alas, no one could even come close to Deidara in battle. He is strong and agile. Get out of here. You'll be back here in a week. And if you continue to be such weaklings, you'll be back in the genin ranks. You failed your first mission. He was harsh and honest with the boys. They left, dejected, before the blonde could get even more angry. Naruto was surprised by this Alpha. Just yesterday he seemed like some kind of idiot, and today he showed himself to be a true professional. The Omega agreed with him, and back in his village he might have said the same, only in a more gentle manner. This is how the Omega nature manifests itself. He wandered around the village for a bit, lost in thought, buying some groceries along the way. He felt himself being watched, but he didn't pay it any mind. He'd grown accustomed to stares during his time here. But this one was a little different. The gaze burned between his shoulder blades, but there was nothing he could do about it. Some unknown feeling compelled the blonde to return to where he just left, defeated by that Alpha. As much as he hated to admit it, even if Naruto had fought this Alpha at full strength, the victor would have been undecided. Or the Omega would have lost. A competitive spirit awakened within him, a spirit he needed to push down. Suddenly, a small white spider fell on the Omega, followed by several more. Giving in to his inner feelings, Naruto shook them off and jumped aside. Just in time, they exploded. The explosions were small, and there would have been no serious damage. You didn't show such a reaction during our sparring. Naruto heard Deidara's voice. Why were you following me? Naruto asked, looking around. Don't be so snotty, Omega. The Alpha said again, and Naruto's skin crawled at the phrase. He didn't understand why he was reacting this way. But then he remembered that his heat was approaching, and his body was reacting to the presence of a strong Alpha nearby. I smell you, and I like it. How about spending your heat with me? After this, Naruto heard the Alpha's booming laughter echoing throughout the clearing. And soon, the owner of that laughter appeared. I'm not a doormat to lie down under every Alpha I meet. The younger one snapped. I'm just suggesting we have a good time, Deidara said, throwing kunai that were either dodged or deflected. The Alpha lunged forward, and Naruto blocked, but Deidara sidestepped, tripping the Omega before he could react, and knocked him to the ground, pinning him with his body. So, you've been caught. I'll ask you again, who are you? During the fight, you're such a softie, and now you're showing your fangs. It's all just the approaching heat. I think you've already sensed it. Especially since you're the one offering indecent things to a young, innocent Omega. Naruto blurted out brazenly, then blushed at his own words and turned away, his neck blazing red before the stunned Alpha's eyes. After the shock wore off, Deidara laughed, releasing the blonde from his grip. Part 6 A week had passed since his skirmish with Deidara, during which Naruto had been struggling with his heat. The Omega remembered that he had to meet the Alpha again today, but his body was so weakened by the heat that he was unlikely to even be able to throw a kunai and hit its target. Everyone had been busy training that week. Shursui warned Deidara about Naruto's problem, but the blonde alpha didn't care about anyone else's problems. The main thing was that his orders were carried out. This time, everything went better, but Naruto disappointed him, and Deidara scolded him severely for it. Everyone has improved their skills at least a little, but you, Omega, have degraded. Naruto held his stomach, where the alpha had hit him without sparing any force. Yes, I'm sorry. Naru apologized, breathing heavily and bowing his head. I hope everyone learned their lesson. The answer was met with complete agreement. See you next time in a week. The jounin finished and disappeared. Naruto, how are you? Nami, another Omega who had passed the exam, ran up to him excitedly. It's fine. Don't worry. The blonde slowly evened out his breathing and stood up. The alphas only looked at him mockingly. But they dropped their smirks after Nami's menacing glare. Apparently, this Omega was a figure of authority among them. Maybe we should train together? After all, they'll test us all together, Nami suggested. This Omega combined intelligence and strength, and was older than the rest of this team. He was probably the same age as Deidara. What's the point? You're strong, I agree, but that one, the alpha nodded towards Naruto, will ruin everything for us. I don't even understand how he managed to pass the exam and fail that idiot. And you think you're the strongest here? Naruto flared up, even though Shursui had strictly forbidden him from engaging in open conflict, especially with the alphas. But right now, the blonde was getting annoyed. He would have continued to rage, but Nami stopped him, squeezing his shoulder and shaking her head. Naruto's fighting spirit faded, and he shrugged irritably before heading home. Naruto spent the rest of the day replenishing his strength with food. Then it was back to training. He didn't tell Shursui what had happened, but Shursui learned everything from Deidara, whom he was working with. Time flew by for the boys here. Naruto was already 17, and not for the first time he hadn't celebrated his birthday, but Shursui congratulated him and even gave him a gift. Naruto stopped communicating with his teammates, and Nami couldn't persuade him to do so. He remained ignored. Naruto understood that the Omega had done nothing wrong to him, but the blonde decided not to get close to anyone here, as they would soon be separated. But how soon that time would be, they didn't know. Shursui was beginning to think that it was time to go home, but unexpectedly, he was gaining more and more access to the village's internal systems. Watching the Uchiha's success, Naruto envied him and didn't understand why he was here, as he had yet to contribute to his village. Shursui noticed this state of mind in the younger Omega and refuted his thoughts. If I'd come alone, I'd never have been entrusted with the position I hold now. After all, you and I are here for revenge, and now you're the most precious thing left in my life. And if I decide to betray them, they'll be able to pressure me through you. It's nonsense, but you're a trump card. So stop thinking like that. Besides, you'll soon be given access to more important information, and that way we can get home faster. As usual, their conversation took place in the Manjikyu Sharingan space. And Naruto truly did calm down. A month later, he was already showing strong results in his battle with Deidara. However, the other team members weren't standing still either. After a few skirmishes with the Jonin, he warned them that the four of them would soon be leaving on a real mission. You are ready! And indeed, they were sent on their first mission outside the village. It was to destroy a Konoha unit protecting an ambassador from the Land of Lightning. If Konoha couldn't protect him, the village of Cloud would show up with a fight, and war wouldn't be far off, as the Raikage was very hot-tempered. The mission was scheduled to begin the next morning. Naruto immediately informed Shursui of this, who handed him a small vial containing information. Only a member of the Uchiha clan could read it. The only problem was that someone wouldn't reveal Naruto's real name, or even turn him in. But that would have to be dealt with on the spot. And now the time had come for their group to move out. Arrow, the mostly silent alpha, was appointed leader. He's a sensible guy. He suggested they split into pairs for the pursuit and back each other up. Everyone agreed. Naruto didn't want to interact with them, but duty is duty. This isn't his home village. Whims are either accepted nor forgiven. When they caught up with the Konoha squad, Naruto recognized the three escorts, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kiba. From their behavior, Naruto realized they'd spotted their pursuers. But the Omega knew this because he knew these guys. They were friends after all. But now it was unclear whether they'd want to continue their friendship after what happened today. Naruto, let's split up and form a circle, Ero whispered softly, to which the Omega nodded in agreement. As soon as Ero disappeared from sight, a white something pounced on Naruto and began licking his face. Ugh, Akamaru, ugh, Naruto whispered quietly, looking around. Now you're going to help me and pass something on to your master discreetly. The blonde relayed everything his friends needed to know and waited for Ero's signal. The Omega sighed with relief when Akamaru loudly drew Kiba's attention and began acting like a normal dog, playing with his master. At first, Kiba was annoyed and tried to shut his dog up, but over time, his face began to stretch in surprise, and then he regained his fighting spirit. He said a few words to Sasuke and Sakura, and they tried to keep their facial expressions as low as possible, which Sasuke managed flawlessly. Mr. Ambassador, I think you'd better stand in the middle if you value your lives, Sasuke said loudly and deliberately, taking a stance ready to rush into battle. After that, the signal didn't take long to arrive. The battle began. Naruto was unlucky enough to face Sasuke, but Sasuke deftly outflanked him, turning on the others. Team Konoha quickly routed Team IWA. Nah, are you two? Sakura drawled, pulling her gloves tighter. Could you explain what this means? First, you disappeared for 6 months without saying anything, and now you're attacking us and our enemies. The girl wanted to kill the Omega right then and there, but Sasuke held her shoulder, preventing her from doing anything. I'm on an infiltration mission, the blonde said quietly, looking at the unconscious bodies. Sakura immediately lowered her hands, but clenched her fists and said in a broken voice. How so? Why didn't you tell us? They banned it. Well, that's enough talk, Kiba said. What should we do with these? Knock Naruto out and leave him with them so there's no suspicion, Sasuke said, looking at the blonde. I'll say hello to the Hokage for you, the Uchiha said, approaching the Omega with an impassive expression. Kiba, please give that thing to my father. The blonde looked at Inuzuka, and then felt pain and fell into darkness. When Naruto woke up, he felt discomfort all over his body, and then he heard a voice calling him. Naruto? Naruto! You're finally awake! A worried voice from the side belonged to Nami. All 4 of them were bound and hanging upside down where they had first contacted Konoha. Everyone was conscious except Ero. Apparently, he had suffered the most. It took a while to free himself. His hands refused to obey their master. Once free, the Omega helped the boys free themselves. This was their first real mission, and they failed. If they hadn't been sent to Konoha, Naruto would have given it his all, and the mission would have been accomplished. But he had no intention of seriously going against his village, much less his friends. Ero came to, looked around at his comrades with a clouded gaze and groaned quietly. What's the progress? He asked hoarsely, trying to rise, but the weakness in his body prevented him from doing so, and he fell back down, where Nami caught him. The Omegas immediately began healing the wounded man. A complete failure. Rin, the second alpha, spoke softly into the silence. The silence returned. We can continue the pursuit after you heal Ero, but then your chakra will weaken. He began to reason. And where are you going with your wounds? Naruto asked rather rudely, speaking to him for the first time in a long time. Especially since it's not a given that we'll catch up with them with our current strength. Especially since they beat us up when we were fully prepared. But those 3 aren't the worst thing that could have happened to us. We're powerless here. He finished quietly, and the others bit their lips to keep from crying. The team returned to the village completely dejected. They were sent to the Tsuchikage, where things didn't go as badly as they thought. However, Naruto was ordered to stay behind, which made him tense. But the Tsuchikage merely asked who they had encountered and if the Omega knew their weaknesses. They had to give up some information, but it was known to many of the enemies who had fought the trio. Neris said he had been a loner in his home village and couldn't find common ground with anyone, so he felt no regrets about betraying them. After that, he was released. But the next day, Deidara gave them a terrible dressing down. You pathetic pieces of shit, couldn't you beat up a girl and some other 2 guys? There were 4 of you against 3 of them, and you still lost. What kind of weaklings are you? I didn't train you so you could embarrass me by losing to some Konoha guys. He accompanied each word with blows that they couldn't block, and in the end, all 4 of them were lying on the ground, writhing in pain. Trained? Naruto managed to squeeze out. You beat us up every week without teaching us anything. And after that, you expected a positive outcome? Day refused to tolerate the accusations and kicked the Omega in the stomach, sending him flying several meters, crashing into a tree. Omega wasn't given a chance to speak. Day shouted irritably and left the boys. After that, they ended up in the hospital and in the same room. Naruto also got verbally abused by the boys, especially the alphas, for arguing with Deidara. This surprised the Omega greatly, as they had constantly teased him about his gender, and now they were talking as if they were friends. Nami smiled approvingly at him and then said he missed out on a lot because he refused to communicate. Naruto, I'm sorry, but that's just how we are and how we were raised. We're used to being surrounded by 2 whole Omegas now. Ero pretended to apologize, and Rin simply nodded in agreement, making Nami laugh. Naruto thought about trying to befriend these guys. Part 7 It took the boys a week to fully recover. Naruto opened up a bit to his new comrades, and they did the same to him, but he never forgot his mission. He understood that once everything was revealed, they would become enemies, which meant he needed to gather as much information as possible about them, especially their weaknesses. Shursui visited the blonde a couple of times in the hospital, where, through the Uchiha's eyes, he told the older man everything that had happened. After being discharged, the boys had to face Deidara again, supposedly for training. But the Alpha surprised them when he actually began training with them more or less normally, only to lose his temper and shout that it wasn't for him. You'll be sent on a new mission soon, and if you fail, a week in the hospital won't be the limit, Deidara said sullenly, leaving the boys. Naruto began training with the boys and even helped them perfect some of their techniques. Just a little. Their teamwork improved significantly. They developed their own secret signs and sounds that wouldn't attract the attention of outsiders. All this was difficult for Naruto. He felt like he was betraying his friends, Konoha. But he quickly dismissed these thoughts. After all, it was all for the sake of achieving his goal. Deidara hadn't lied, and they were indeed being sent on a new mission. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief when he learned the enemy wasn't Konoha. But the enemy was dangerous, and the boys were being sent into open conflict with a gang from the village of Mist, whose rampage had encroached on the land of Wind. They were robbing, destroying, and slaughtering the inhabitants of outlying villages. Naruto couldn't stand that. No matter the country, such things were unforgivable. Omega had already prepared himself for this mission, awaiting departure. This time the boys were better prepared and had a backup plan just in case. Having reached the suspected location of the criminals, the boys found complete devastation and emptiness. There were no living beings anywhere. Only corpses of people of all ages. Naruto bit his lip in anger and despair. They were too late. They had been warned, but now the boys had no idea where the bandits could be headed. But they had some guesses. There were 4 villages nearby, 3 of which, according to reports, had been burned. The 4th remained. To save time and the lives of others, the team raced in that direction at full speed, but their journey was short. The gang of shinobi was found camping in the forest. They were clearly celebrating another successful raid. After communicating with secret signs, Rin charged first, briefly throwing his opponents off balance. They quickly reacted and repelled the attack, though he still managed to lightly hit one. The bandits were few in number, only 6, but very strong. They rushed the Alpha from all sides, leaving him unable to dodge, until Naruto came to his aid. "If you thought we'd lose and die here, I'll kill you myself," the blonde smirked. The shinobi, seeing the Omega come to their aid, burst into laughter, which the boys took advantage of and attacked. A battle ensued. Neither gave in. Ero and Nami slipped into the fray unnoticed, but it was to no avail. Naruto decided to use most of his strength to win. He didn't want to, but the desire to win overcame the blonde. However, the Omega misjudged his strength and used a technique that was too powerful, but the advantage was theirs. The fight was tough, But Team Rock emerged victorious. It came at a high cost. They were practically battered, and Naruto and Nami had exhausted their chakra reserves to even begin healing. The team spent a day healing their wounds, but, rested and recovered, they calmly headed back to the village, having recovered the invaders. This was their first successful mission, and the guys were delighted. Upon returning, they received an approving nod from Deidara. Nami blushed at this action, and Naruto glanced at him suspiciously, but didn't comment on what he saw. The Omega's only concern now was getting to a hot bath and bed. He wasn't the only one thinking about it, but thoughts aren't always material, so the boys had to stop to talk to Deidara. Fortunately, he didn't keep them waiting long with his banter. Instead, he took the intruders and briefly asked about the mission, then sent them off to rest. But there was something at home that Naruto definitely didn't expect. Everything was turned upside down, and some alpha was rummaging around in Shirsui's room. The blonde recognized him. He was one of the people assigned to watch them. "May I ask what's going on here?" the Omega asked, leaning against the doorframe. "No." The alpha seemed unaware of the other shinobi's presence. Or perhaps because Naruto had concealed his presence, the blonde now observed the surprised expression of the young man, who had abruptly stopped what he was doing and was even looking at the Omega with a hint of fear. Naruto was surprised by this fear, but he didn't show it, merely stretching his lips into a smile. "Well, why did you stop? Go on, I won't disturb you." The Omega's words stunned the boy. The Alpha thought he'd get upset and start a fight, but this Omega turned out to be strange, and even mocked him. "How dare you, Omega, talk to me like that? I'm a Chunin, and I do what I want." "Oh, what?" Naruto even forgot about his fatigue and only stretched his lips into a wider smile. "Well, I'm a Chunin too. So what now? By the way, the owner of this room is a Jounin. What are you going to do?" "I know that without you," the Alpha snapped. "An order came from above to search the house, and specifically Shursui Uchiha's room." "I won't say more," the boy said smugly and returned to his task. "And what did he do?" "Well, if that's your order, then go ahead, but if anything goes missing, it's your own fault. And also, be careful, or you'll stumble upon his vibrator. Shursui won't forgive you. And put everything back where it belongs," Naruto said with a chuckle and headed to his room. He decided to skip the first step of the plan and go straight to bed. Just then, Shursui returned, angry that some green alpha was rummaging through his things at home, but he couldn't do anything about it. So he must have screwed up somewhere. It's a good thing he didn't keep the information he'd obtained at home, but in a safe place that even Naruto hadn't told him about. A while later, Deidara also paid a visit to find out about the false lead they'd been given. Naruto watched the conversation between the two and was surprised that Deidara was talking to Shursui as an equal, despite him being an Omega. "Sorry about all this, but the old man always checks everyone in case he doesn't like something." "I understand everything. Besides, we're not from around here, so we have to endure it," Uchiha growled through his teeth, to which Deidara patted him on the head. "Don't talk nonsense. You've proven yourself trustworthy more than once, so we'll find whoever framed you." The Alpha looked the Omega in the eye as he spoke. He lacked the arrogance he'd felt when talking to Naruto's teammates. The blonde left everything to Shursui and went to his room. Thoughts flitted through his head, but sleep and fatigue prevailed, and he fell asleep almost immediately. Time passed slowly, as usual. Naruto and Shursui were under surveillance. After all, that search hadn't been without consequences. It seemed they'd been caught, but there was no hard evidence, so they were being watched. The Omegas silently accepted this and went on with their lives. Naruto had gotten used to everything that was happening and had sincerely grown fond of his comrades, and they, too, adored their comrade. They were also sent on missions of varying difficulty, and almost all of them were completed. Sometimes missions were unsuccessful, but the guys tried to compensate. Deidara gradually began to interact with them more or less normally. At least there was no longer that arrogant superiority from the first weeks when they first met. And after the senior alpha, going with them on yet another mission, saw everything, or almost everything, that his charges were capable of, he began to interact with them normally. Nami tried to always be close to him, which sometimes angered Rin and Arrow. Naruto asked why he liked this explosive alpha so much, to which he received the answer. I think I've fallen in love with Deidara. He's so strong and handsome. And he's the future Tsuchikage. Who wouldn't want to be the heir's lover? Especially since, as far as I know, he likes omegas more than women. So, Naruto, we still have a chance to catch this gorgeous man in our net. The omega winked at the blonde and quickly ran off to do his business. And Naruto wondered if he wanted a relationship. He was a young omega, and it was high time he started thinking about it. But he wasn't in his village to fall in love. But there was one alpha the omega liked. They met and had a good conversation, but then he quickly disappeared, and a month later, Naruto saw him with another omega. That's when he decided he wouldn't start a relationship here, because it would be even more painful to leave. Ero, Rin, and Nami had quietly become as close to him as Sasuke, Sakura, and the rest of the Konoha boys. He couldn't imagine his life without them. One day, he told Shursui everything, and Shursui hugged him, running his fingers through his hair, gently stroking it. I'm sorry things turned out this way, and I'm sorry they chose you here. It's going to be tough, but I'll be there for you, and your friends and family will be there for you. The blonde man felt a little better after that. When the time came for their new mission, Nami wasn't with them. He was in heat, so they set off again under Deidara's command. Naruto hadn't really wanted to see him, but now he had to. He had a bad feeling about this assignment. And it came true. The mission was to meet a spy sent to Konoha and extract all information from him. Nothing complicated. They wouldn't even have to sneak into the village itself. Just a meeting in the land of fire. The only thing Naruto didn't know was how long this man had been spying on his village. What if he recognized the blonde as the Hokage's son? Then he and Shursui would be in trouble. And, as luck would have it, the Uchiha was on his own mission. Oh, come what may! Naruto thought before heading off. But everything went well, even suspiciously well. The blonde truly didn't know the man, just as the man didn't know him. But the complete silence on his home grounds was alarming. So they knew about the meeting? Because Naruto was sure there were a lot of shinobi concentrated in that area to protect the village, and on the day of the information exchange, no one was there. Deciding not to dwell on it, the Omega followed the Alphas back. He still couldn't understand why they needed a four-man squad when one could have handled it just fine, but then quickly dismissed the thought. Backup and teamwork. That's why they were sent together. As soon as the Omega's attention wandered, he noticed a glint below. A glint he knew all too well. Itachi was calling him. I don't like this. Ero interrupted him. It's too quiet. I agree, but that doesn't mean we'll burst into their home as if it were our own. Deidara answered with unusual calm. Why are Kamen and Konoha fighting? Naruto asked timidly, hoping his question wouldn't arouse suspicion. Our old man had a falling out with the previous Hokage, and now both villages are paying the price. Only Minato is trying to make peace, while our old man is as stubborn as a goat, and he won't budge. And no one knows what the hell they were up to. Deidara muttered through gritted teeth. Everyone realized he didn't like it. Then become Tsuchikage already and accept the world. Rin smirked, earning a glare from the Jonin, who fell silent, looking down in shame. Deidara was a strong alpha, and the other alphas recognized it. Something's bothering me down there. I'll go check it out. Naruto reported and rushed off, not waiting for the alpha's reproaches. You realized, right? We deliberately eliminated our own people? Itachi appeared before the Omega. Almost all the information in the document is false, so don't interfere with its transmission to the Tsuchikage, so as not to expose you and Shursui. Okay. Is that all you wanted to tell me? How long will our mission last? Naruto finally managed to ask the question that was bothering him and hoped to get a clear answer, but his expectations were not met. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I really don't know.